Camping trips, hunting and fishing expeditions, long hikes, the forest can be an enchanting and magical place for most people to escape the hustle and bustle of civilization for a few days. But what happens when that very isolation we crave transforms from a dream into a nightmare? Join me tonight deep in the woods for 5 terrifying stories from forest rangers, if you dare. Number 5. Symbols in the trees. I had spent years as a park ranger, living in the solitude of the deep forest. The dense woods around me always seemed mysterious, but I never paid too much attention to the stories of strange occurrences or haunting legends. I prided myself on being rational and level-headed, and believed there was always a good, logical explanation for everything. It was just another typical night in the forest when things took a chilling turn. As the darkness enveloped the woods, I sat at my ranger station, going through the usual routine of logging reports and patrolling the perimeter. Out of nowhere, I heard a faint rustling sound coming from the nearby bushes. Brushing it off as some nocturnal creature, I continued my work, but an uneasy feeling lingered. Throughout the night, the odd noises persisted. I heard what I thought were footsteps, distant laughter, and whispers that sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Trying to remain composed, I attributed it to my imagination playing tricks on me, but as the night wore on, incidents escalated and became increasingly unsettling. At one point, I spotted strange symbols etched onto the trees surrounding my station. They seemed almost otherworldly, and I couldn't fathom who would have the time or inclination to create such eerie markings. A growing sense of dread consumed me, but I told myself that vandals or pranksters were likely at fault. As I ventured outside to investigate, I saw the trees sway violently without any wind. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced around me. I just knew something wasn't right, and my instincts screamed at me to retreat to the safety of my station. I locked the door behind me, hoping to barricade myself from whatever was out there. But whatever malevolent presence had invaded the forest wasn't going to be deterred. A banging on the door began, and guttural growls, like none I'd ever heard before, echoed through the woods. Fear gripped my heart as I realized there was no rational explanation for what was happening. I reached for the radio to call for backup, only to find it malfunctioning, emitting distorted static. And that's when panic set in, and I knew I had to escape this nightmare. With trembling hands, I grabbed my gear and made a desperate dash for my car. The forest seemed to conspire against me, making the path treacherous and confusing. And the entire time, I was overcome with that unshakable feeling that something was right behind me, right on my heels. That even taking time to glance over my shoulder would be a death sentence. However, after a few moments, and to my relief, the shine of my windshield came into view. I threw my belongings into my car, jumped in the front seat, twisted the ignition, and gunned it in the direction of the exit. But just as I pulled out of the dirt lot and onto the forest road that would lead me towards the highway, to my terror, I caught a glimpse of a horrifying figure in my rearview mirror. Its features were obscured, but the mere sight of it sent shivers coursing through my veins. I had never believed in the supernatural, but this creature defied all logic and reason. It stood on 2 legs, towering over saplings that were, to my estimation, around 8 or 10 feet in height. Its skin was a sickly pale gray and stretched tightly over its skeletal frame. Its elongated arms concluded in long, bony fingers, each equipped with dagger-like claws. But its face was the most horrifying aspect of all. A grotesque amalgamation of various animal features. It had the eyes of a predatory cat, glowing with malevolent intelligence, and the snout of a wolf, filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. Horn-like spikes adorned its head, adding to the beast's nightmarish appearance. Finally, as I emerged from the forest, the oppressive presence lifted, and I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I didn't dare look back, fearing that the creature might be following me, but deep down, I knew that my encounter with the unknown was far from over. Weeks turned into months, and I couldn't ease the memory of that harrowing night. Eventually, I resigned from my post, unable to shake the trauma of the experience, but I never spoke of what I had witnessed, knowing that no one would believe my story anyway. To this day, I still can't explain the horrors that unfolded in that deep forest, but I now understand that some mysteries defy explanation, and the boundaries between reality and the supernatural are far more blurred than I ever imagined. The memory of that terrifying creature still haunts my dreams, a constant reminder that some things are best left undiscovered in the darkness of the wood. Number 4, the abandoned campsite. I had always been drawn to the mysterious allure of the forest, and becoming a park ranger fulfilled my childhood dreams. The deep woods were my sanctuary, and I cherished every moment spent patrolling their trails and preserving the natural beauty around me. One fateful night, as the full moon cast an eerie glow on the forest, I set out on my routine patrol. The woods were unusually silent, and an uneasy feeling washed over me. I tried to shake off the sensation, convincing myself that it was just my imagination running wild. As I walked deeper into the forest, the distant howling of wolves sent a shiver down my spine. I had encountered them before, but tonight their calls seemed more intense, almost desperate. Something about the whole situation felt off, and it got me wondering if something was amiss. Suddenly, I stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. The fire here was still smoldering, and the tents were torn to shreds. My heart began to pound as I noticed strange footprints in the mud, large and clawed, unlike any animal I'd ever seen in this forest. Slowly, fear began to gnaw at me, and I instinctively reached for my radio to call for backup. Before I could speak a word into the radio, however, a blood-curdling screech filled the air. It was strange and otherworldly, a chilling sound that pierced through the silence of the night. My hands trembled, and I fumbled with the radio, dropping it to the ground. Then suddenly, emerging from the shadows, a horrifying creature stepped into the clearing. Its massive form loomed over the campsite, its mottled scales blending seamlessly with the darkness, and its reptilian eyes were a piercing shade of yellow and burned with an intense and recognizable hunger. This creature had unimaginably huge arms and hands that ended in razor-sharp talons, with a maw filled with rows of jagged teeth. Disturbingly, for its size, it moved with an unnatural grace, as if it were a predator perfectly adapted to the darkness of the forest. I took a step back, my heart racing as I realized the true danger I was facing. This was no ordinary manifestation of the woods. It was a monster, something possibly ancient, and that had been lurking and hunting in the shadows for centuries. As I tried to back away, this creature let out another bone-chilling screech, causing the ground to tremble beneath my feet. Panic consumed me as I turned to run, desperate to escape the clutches of this nightmarish thing. With each step, the woods seemed to close in around me, the trees and branches twisting and reaching out as if trying to ensnare me. I could feel their presence, as if they were alive, complicit in the terror that was unfolding. But I pushed through, refusing to succumb to the forest's eerie attempts to slow me down, to keep me. I forced myself in the direction I knew my station was. After what felt like an eternity, the glow of my ranger's hut came into view. As I burst out of the woods and into the safety of the open clearing leading to my defense, I didn't dare look back. I didn't know if this creature was still pursuing me, and I wasn't about to gamble the time it would take to find out. To my relief, upon reaching the door of the station, I found the surrounding forests quiet, and there was no sign anywhere of my pursuer. While I considered radioing out for help, after some forethought, I decided to keep my mouth shut. Anyone that I relayed this ordeal to would think me crazy, and I would likely risk losing my job. From that night on, the forest held a new terror for me. I could never erase the memory of the creature's threatening presence and the bone-chilling screeches that haunted my nightmares. My once-beloved woods had become a place of darkness and of danger, a place where ancient evils lurked just out of sight, and I knew I would never be the same again. Number 3. Glow. In the heart of the dense forest, I took on the role of a dedicated park ranger, entrusted with the protection and preservation of the natural wonders that thrived around me. This forest was known for its mystique, with chilling tales of spirits and ancient entities weaving through its trees. And as skeptical as I was, I had always approached such stories with a measure of caution. One moonlit night, as I patrolled the tranquil trails, an unnatural chill hung in the air. The wind whispered with an otherworldly cadence, and I sensed an eerie presence enveloping me. Brushing it off as a trick of the imagination, I continued my rounds, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of autumn leaves underfoot. As I ventured deeper into the woods, however, the forest seemed to grow silent, and I mean unnaturally so, like when prey in the area becomes aware of a predator. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was out there, watching. Then something shook me from my thoughts. A soft glow appeared through the trees, beckoning me to its source. I cautiously followed, my curiosity outweighing my trepidation. This glow led me to a secluded clearing where, to my astonishment, a luminescent figure hovered in the air, ethereal and radiant. The spirit's presence felt both calming and unsettling at the same time, an enigmatic combination that stirred conflicting emotions within me. Its form was fluid, shimmering in an ever-changing glow that mesmerized and frightened me simultaneously. Though its face was serene, its eyes seemed to peer into the depths of my very soul. Unable to tear my gaze away, I felt an inexplicable connection with this spirit. It seemed to communicate without words, offering to share its ancient wisdom and secrets of the forest lost to a time long since past. Yet, as I delved deeper into the spirit's ethereal realm, a sense of foreboding enveloped me. It wasn't just an innocent, benevolent entity. Beneath its ethereal beauty, there was an underlying layer of darkness I sensed that sent a shiver down my spine. At the very last moment, before I was drawn into its enchanting aura, my eyes caught sight of something that unsettled me. Below the spirit, and only a few steps from where I was standing, was a gaping pit nearly 40 feet deep, and within its depths lay barely visible the skeletons of countless men and women, all drawn into the same fate. Fear clutched at my heart as I realized the truth. This spirit wasn't a guardian of the forest, but a malevolent force preying on unsuspecting souls. Like so many living, breathing human beings, its beauty was a facade, concealing the horrors that lurked beneath. With a newfound strength, I tore my eyes away from the spirit's haunting gaze and stumbled backwards. Instantly, its features took on a look of pure malevolence, of anger, and it began to drift unnaturally towards me. Panic surged through my body as I sprinted back through the forest, the trees seemingly closing in around me, their branches reaching out to entangle me in their grasp. This forest, once my refuge, was now a labyrinth of terror. I could feel the spirit's presence following me, its ethereal glow flickering through the shadows, always seemingly one step behind. Finally, I burst out of the woods gasping for breath, and a new glow, the glow of civilization, greeted me like a warm embrace. I just managed to make it back to the edge of town, but my memory of the spirit's threatening gaze and the pit filled with bones remained, etched into my mind. From that night on, I couldn't erase the encounter from my thoughts. The forest, with all of its enigmatic beauty, had an unsettling allure that I could never fully comprehend. I knew that I had witnessed something far surpassing human understanding, something that existed beyond the realms of science and logic. As a ranger, I continued to protect and preserve the forest, but with a newfound respect for its mysteries. I had encountered a malevolent entity, a creature preying on the unsuspecting, and this encounter served as a haunting reminder that there were forces in this world far beyond our comprehension, presences that watched and guarded with lethal efficiency, unyielding to the passage of time. And when I eventually moved on to future journeys through the forest's enigmatic embrace, I knew I would forever be captivated by its haunting beauty and the chilling secrets that lay within. Number 2. Tap Tap Tap. In the heart of an isolated forest, I lived as a ranger, overseeing the preservation of the untamed wilderness that surrounded my cabin. The dense trees loomed tall and imposing, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the flickering light of my fireplace. The serenity of the woods was often disrupted by the haunting cries of nocturnal creatures, but for the most part, I was able to identify these sounds and quell any nerves that may follow. One moonless night, however, as I settled into my cabin, a sense of unease washed over me. The usual sounds of the forest were eerily absent, leaving a deafening silence in their wake. Despite my years of experience, a chill crept down my spine and a feeling of being watched lingered in the back of my mind. I attributed this unease to the solitude and vastness of the forest, dismissing it as paranoia. Determined to shake off this discomfort, I focused on my nightly routine, stoking my fireplace and preparing for the long hours ahead. As I sat by the fire, a faint rustling sound echoed from outside the cabin. I strained my ears, listening intently, but the sound ceased abruptly, leaving me with an unsettling silence once more. My instincts urged me to investigate, but an inexplicable fear rooted me to my seat. Then, out of nowhere, a soft tapping began against my cabin's window, as if someone was gently rapping on its glass. My heart quickened, and I peered out into the darkness, my hand unconsciously reaching for the knife I kept by my side. This tapping continued, growing more insistent, and my unease intensified. As I approached the window, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I gasped in horror as I saw a distorted figure lurking in the shadows just beyond the glass. The creature's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and its limbs seemed twisted. It wore a tattered cloak that billowed in the breeze, making it appear both ghostly and grotesque. Its face was obscured, hidden beneath the shroud of a hood. Fear gripped my chest as I stumbled back from the window, unsure of what I was looking at. Then it reached out a withered hand and persisted tapping on the window, and this hunched abomination's haunting presence seemed to seep into the cabin, suffusing the very air with an oppressive malevolence. Summoning all of my courage, I grabbed a flashlight and shone it towards the creature. As the beam of light fell upon its form, to my surprise, it let out a chilling wail that reverberated through the woods. Its sound was both mournful and vengeful all at once, as if whatever it were seeking retribution from the living world itself. But as this thing proceeded to circle the cabin, I noticed something even more disturbing. It seemed to be observing my door and the lock with an intelligent curiosity, as if attempting to find a way inside. It pressed a long, twisted finger against the wood, scratching and clawing, desperate to enter. The realization that this thing was trying to breach the cabin's defenses filled me with dread. My sanctuary, my last line of defense, was under siege from an unknown horror. Panic surged through me as I reinforced the locks and barricaded the door with whatever furniture I could find. As I retreated to the corner of the cabin, the tapping and scratching grew more frenzied, and the creature's haunting wails echoed through the night. I could feel its intent, a presence fueled by hunger that I could barely comprehend, that seeked to claim me as its prey. For what felt like an eternity, this creature circled the cabin, its unsettling presence never relenting. It seemed to be testing every defense, searching for any weakness that would allow it to breach the barriers. With each passing moment, tension within the cabin grew thicker to a suffocating level. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to weigh down on me, threatening to crush me under its mass. But finally, as the first rays of dawn painted the horizon, the creature's haunting wails diminished into the distance, as it retreated into the shadow of the forest. Even so, I remained huddled in the corner, unable to shake the terror that had enveloped me. From that night onward, I lived with a profound respect for the mysteries of the woods. I now knew that the forest held secrets far beyond my understanding, and had gained perspective that I was just a mere mortal, vulnerable to the unknown horrors that dwelled within its depths. Number 1. The Owl. Far within a dense state park forest in the Pacific Northwest, I served as a ranger for a time, keeping a watchful eye over the natural wonders that lay hidden within its depths. This forest was renowned for its beauty and tranquility, attracting visitors from far and wide seeking solace within its serene and evergreen embrace. However, as the saying goes, looks can be deceiving. One crisp autumn night, as the leaves rustled under the moon's gentle glow, an unsettling feeling developed inside of me. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I brushed the sensation off as mere nerves, the result of spending too much time alone in the wilderness. As I completed my final rounds before retiring to my cabin, an eerie hooting echoed through the trees. I instantly recognized this sound as the call of an owl, but there was an unsettling quality to it. It sounded almost mournful, like a lament to the darkness. Shaking off my initial unease, I returned to my cabin, hoping a good night's sleep would dispel my apprehensions. But as I lay in bed, the haunting hoots continued, growing louder and more persistent. It was as if this owl's voice was joined by many others, creating a disconcerting symphony that seemed to permeate the very walls of my shelter. Determined to put an end to this unnerving sound, I ventured outside with a flashlight in hand. I followed the hooting deeper into the forest, my frail beam of light illuminating the path before me. With each subsequent step, the trees seemed to draw closer, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Suddenly, the hooting ceased and was instead replaced by an eerie silence that sent a chill down my spine. I felt a sense of being watched, as if unseen eyes were observing my every movement. "Hello!" I called out, my voice echoing through the woods, but there was no response, only an unsettling stillness. Then, from the darkness, a pair of glowing eyes appeared. They were not the eyes of an owl, mind you, but something much larger and more ominous. My heart pounded in my chest as I cautiously approached, and my flashlight revealed a disturbing scene. Before me was a creature that stood on two legs, towering over me like a grotesque nightmare. Its body seemed a horrific fusion of human and possibly crow-like features. It had feathers covering portions of its twisted form, with black mottled skin patches beneath, and its arms, which were more like elongated wings, were tipped with razor-sharp talons. But its face was the worst. It was a sickening combination of a crow's beak and a human-like visage, and was filled with a sinister intelligence. Both fear and adrenaline gripped me as I stood face to face with this creature. Suddenly, it darted from side to side threateningly, its movements unnaturally quick and jerky. I raised my flashlight, attempting to assert my presence, but the creature's unnerving caws reverberated through the forest, warning me of its lethality. In a sudden burst of movement, this bird-like thing lunged toward me, its talons narrowly missing my shoulder. My heart began to race as I stumbled backwards, desperate to put distance between myself and certain death. But this creature wasn't finished with its terrifying display. Unpredictably and incredibly quickly, it darted through the thickets, disappearing into the darkness, leaving me unsure of where it was or what its next move might be. My breaths came in ragged gasps as I hurriedly made my way back to the safety of my cabin. The forest itself seemed to close around me, the once familiar trails now transformed into an ominous labyrinth. Every rustle of leaves, every hoot of that owl which was now vocal once again, sent shivers down my spine, as if the woods themselves were alive with hidden dangers. Each step felt like an eternity as I navigated the shadowy landscape. The moon's light cast eerie silhouettes around me, and my heart pounded in my chest, fearful of any sudden movements that might produce God knew what from the darkness. Finally, the glow of my cabin came into view, a beacon of safety in the encroaching night. I fumbled for my keys, my hands trembling, and rushed inside, barricading the door next to me. I then grabbed my pistol and waited for the scratching of those claws on the exterior of my room, waited for the door to burst open and for that thing to come in, waited until morning. But to my surprise, everything stayed quiet. This haunting encounter with the abomination had left an undeniable mark on my very soul. I knew that I could never see the forest in the same light again. It was no longer just a place of beauty and tranquility, but a realm of malevolence, of horrors lurking in the shadows, waiting to be discovered by those daring enough to venture into its heart. Thanks for exploring these 5 tales of terror with me. If you enjoyed hearing my scary stories, subscribe to my channel, like this upload, and share me with anyone you feel could use a good fright. Stay safe out there.